Welcome to the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast, your daily podcast covering the Iowa Hawkeyes for the Locked On Sports Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Andrew Wade, and I'm also a contributor at Fansided's Iowa Hawkeye website called DearOldGold.com. And I'm very excited about today's show, not exactly about the topic, as we're going to be talking a lot about the men's basketball team and how atrocious their loss was on Saturday afternoon against Rutgers. But I am excited because today I'm joined by my best friend and another contributor at Dear Old Gold, Jared Starkweather. Jared, thank you for jumping on today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, the people don't know this, but you are jumping on here, A, because you're very intelligent and I enjoy talking to you, but also because I did not watch the game yesterday. I was busy driving through a freaking blizzard in the mountains and trying not to go off the road. But you actually were at the game. So want to talk to you a lot about the basketball game today, or, on the show today. And just from looking at the stat line, Iowa didn't shoot very well. And coming into this game, I know Rutgers did a really good job against Iowa the first time defensively. They're one of the taller teams that Iowa has to face. They're pretty physical. Defensively, they're strong. I mean, they forced Iowa into kind of a decent amount of sloppy turnovers. What were kind of your key takeaways? I mean, was Iowa just not shooting the ball well, or was Rutgers playing pretty sound defense?
Well, first let me just say I was super excited to go to the game, and then I probably would have ended up rather driving through a blizzard like you.
That's very unfortunate.
Takeaways, yeah, Rutgers, your initial thought is Rutgers is probably one of those few teams that is bigger than Iowa, I feel like.
Yep.
Most games you go into, Iowa is probably one of the bigger teams, the lengthier teams. We can dominate kind of down low with Garza and Cook and everybody, but Rutgers has a lot of size, and they were not given any ground down there. So early on, we tried to shoot. We're normally a pretty good three-point shooting team. We're just ice cold, absolutely ice cold from the three-point line. Rutgers defense certainly had a lot to do with that, but they were just like a lot of the turnovers were careless turnovers, some poor shots, things like that. I mean, it was pretty bad. It was about as bad as it could get.
Yeah, I mean, you made an interesting point that Rutgers has a lot of size, and I think they are the tallest team that Iowa faces in terms of overall size throughout their lineup, and they don't really have any real small players on their team, especially in their starting five. Another thing that caught me kind of interesting is, Rutgers has a lot of size, and that can be a detriment to Iowa. And I think, an analyst on Twitter made a really good point that there's just some teams in college basketball that other teams don't match up well against. It's kind of like Iowa versus Michigan. Iowa matches up pretty well against Michigan, and vice versa. Rutgers matches up pretty well against Iowa just because they actually take their size and it's even bigger and stronger, and they're able to push around Iowa. I think the opposite of that is Ohio State, where they're not tall at all, and instead of trying to play up to Iowa's size, they took advantage of Iowa's size and really played small ball and allowed the game to go through Caleb Wesson. Do you feel like Ohio State and Rutgers are just kind of anomalies in the sense that they just match up well against Iowa and that they can't really play the big game against them? They kind of do some different things there.
Yeah, there could be something to that. I do think Rutgers just seems to be a problem for Iowa in general. Ohio State, there were times that game they did go small and Iowa tried to go small to match, but no one's from Iowa's side is going to admit that our guard play isn't exactly the best. It's a matchup problem.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I don't know if you've started to kind of get this trend, and I can't tell if it's how bad Iowa's defense is or just something about Iowa, but when people play Iowa, they have their career nights. Ron Harper Jr. can't freaking miss when he plays the Hawks. Against Ohio State, it was some guy I can't even name again because I can't remember his name because he's a bench player who averaged 2 points before the game.
Yeah, but to your point it was the 3-point line. Iowa, their man-to-man defense isn't the greatest. They've had a lot of success when they do switch to zone defenses, which they switch up quite a bit. But, the best way to break a zone is to shoot out of it, and Rutgers could not miss. Harper Jr. went off for Krunat, he said, but they had another player, his name's escaping me. In the first half, they put him in. He went 3 for 3 or 4 for 4 or something like that from 3. It seemed like every corner shot he had, he made.
Was it Isa Tham?
Yeah, I think that might have been it.
Dude, he's 6'10". Holy crap!
It was just one of those things where the zone Zone kind of was put in place to keep them away from the basket, kind of counteract their size and strength down low. But then they were just shooting lights out from outside. So just kind of pick your poison, and we fortunately couldn't hang with them.
Yeah, that's tough. And obviously, Fran McCaffery being out, I don't know how big of an impact that had. I was reading some tweets and some commentary that some of the assistants were really laying into a few of the guys on the Hawks in the middle of the game and whatnot. But wanted to get your feel for that. What was the sense of the game? Did you feel like the game was played differently, or there was a different sort of energy without Fran there?
I don't know that it was played differently. I mean, I think these assistant coaches have quite a bit of say in the game planning and practices in general. Fran was allowed to practice with them all week and prepare too. So I don't know that the preparation was probably exactly the same. I don't know that the game flow was any different. Andrew Francis was the acting head coach. I think he did call a timeout at one point, which, Fran kind of is notorious for letting them play through and not using those timeouts necessarily. But I don't think, I don't know that it changed much. I mean, there was a late call, a blocking call that against Iowa that we thought, looked like he had set his feet. Maybe it was Bohannon, and should have been a charge. Crowd got pretty upset about it at the time. And, that was an instance where Fran definitely might have been halfway out mid-court there trying to – and you could tell the assistant coaches were maybe a little more laid back about it. But, they were certainly out there, laying into the referees and laying into the players too. So I don't know. It's hard for me to say that Fran not being there had an impact negatively or positively. I just feel like he was involved enough in the game prep leading up to it that it – and assistant coaches, they've all been together for, it's 9 years. Time. So they know how Fran coaches. I feel like they have similar tendencies. They all have head coaching experience themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I thought that was interesting kind of going into the game, how the players would respond. At the end of the day, it's ultimately on the players. You can put together a great game plan, but if they can't execute and do what's needed, then it doesn't really matter. And just I'm looking up these stats real quick. So I thought it was interesting when you said, Rutgers are shooting lights out from three. And I thought I remember them being pretty terrible. And I was right. They're 11th in the Big Ten at shooting the three-pointer at 32%. Do you want to take a guess at what they shot against Iowa?
45, close to 50 maybe.
Yeah, dude, 47.8%. So they were 15 points above their average this season. Like, that is absolutely ridiculous. Do you think, to me, Iowa did a pretty good job earlier this season, I think, of playing defense, not a good job, but a better job than last year. And it kind of went and kind of spurts, right? Some games they played pretty poorly. Some games they were able to shoot their way out of it. Some games they actually had some pretty stout defensive, series. And I thought that was pretty impressive against Illinois, especially. They did a great job defensively. But the last 5 or 6 games, it feels like they're playing similar to how they played last year, where they're trying to win offensively. And when they're not shooting, there's nothing they can really do about it.
Yeah, you think when a lot of good teams, if their shooting's not there, they can really rely on their defense, kind of settle in defensively, and therefore take the other team's offense out of the game until your shooting can kind of heat up. Whereas it seems like you're right with Iowa, they try to beat teams offensively, and when their shooting goes cold, it just all goes to hell, and this game's over. Before you can do it, they're not really settling in defensively. Again, Rutgers had something to do with that. I think they shot pretty well. Whether that's them or Iowa's defense, I think their size down low certainly played factors with pushing Garza and Cook around. But yeah, Iowa gave up 90 to Ohio State and 86 to Rutgers, which those are all well above Iowa's average for allowing teams up to that point this year. So it's a discouraging trend that kind of feeds into the narrative of the February fades that Fran's teams seem to have throughout his career here at Iowa, unfortunately.
Yeah, man. I mean, 3 games ago, Iowa had matched its best regular season record under Fran McCaffery, and they're still currently tied as the best regular season, tied for the best regular season record under Fran McCaffery. I mean, they have Wisconsin up next, followed by Nebraska. The Nebraska team, I think that's an interesting game just because they're missing Isaac Copeland Jr. They're kind of their second leading scorer for most of the season until he's out for the rest of the year. And since then, they've been kind of in a free fall. Nebraska's kind of a tough place to play. Wisconsin, though, is kind of similar to Iowa in a sense, man. They're kind of, I mean, less major issues, but I think more inconsistent just in general. They're kind of up and down. I think a lot of Wisconsin fans are getting frustrated by the play of Wisconsin, not knowing if they're going to win or lose a game. And I feel like that's how Iowa Hawkeye fans feel as well. What are your thoughts on the Iowa-Wisconsin game, just kind of quickly? What do you think? Do you think Iowa can turn it around, basically? Do you think they're going to be able to win these last two games? I think people may not realize this, but momentum's huge. And if you can go in winning the last two games of the regular season into the Big Ten Conference tournament, maybe win one or two games there. If you can win the two games there, I think there's a lot of momentum going into the NCAA tournament. But if Iowa limps to a finish, I feel like they're screwed come March come March Madness time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they might already be hurting themselves because that Rutgers loss dropped their net ranking. They were looking at like a 4 or 5 seed. Now we're talking 8 or 9, which is not at all where you want to be. I think they match up well with Wisconsin. Kind of how we were talking about maybe Rutgers being like a bad matchup for them. I think they match up well with Wisconsin. Wisconsin can be hot and cold. Wisconsin's a very defensive-minded team. Their average scoring and average points allowed are pretty low, probably lower in the Big Ten, I would imagine. But it's definitely a game. The pace could allow for us to use our bigs. It could allow maybe to settle in and get some three-point shooting. And I think we can turn it around because the whole team seems like they've been cold the last couple weeks.
Yeah.
Moss and Wieskamp and Bohannon, and you just think at some point one of these guys has got to. Right?
Someone's got to start making shots at some point, you'd think.
I mean, you got to commend in the Rutgers game. It seemed early on, Wieskamp was pretty aggressive early on. He had a lot of takes and drives to the hoop, trying to draw fouls. I think he only made a draw once or twice and got in the line. But there was an effort by him to try to get to the line. And then that just kind of went away, it seemed like. And then it was just settling for jump shots and easy buckets or easy shots that weren't real advised and they weren't making. And they need to get back into that to attack the hoop. If shots aren't falling, kind of work the perimeter guys, get the guards getting slashing and cutting in and moving towards the basket instead of just settling for those easy jump shots or force feeding the ball into Cook and turning it over half a dozen times.
There's a couple things. Yeah, I mean, I've noticed in the last couple of games, Cook has been he's struggled, I think, personally. He's trying to do too much, it almost seems like. He's trying to do, control the ball and actually handling the ball outside of the paint, which is not exactly his strength. And you can tell there's a lot of athleticism there, but he gets wild when he's up, outside of the paint, and he kind of, turns it over a bit. I think also just in general, he's been pressing from the paint in general. He hasn't made as many shots the last couple of games. So I think want to get your thoughts on that from Tyler Cook perspective. I mean, he's at this point, the best NBA prospect right now on the Hawks roster, but he has been playing completely, down to another level that's not really what we're used to seeing with Tyler Cook. Why do you think he's kind of pressing, or have you noticed that he's been pressing as well the last couple of games?
I think he's been pressing. Their offense has been cold. He's the best player. I mean, I think they all know it. So yeah, he's probably pressing to try to make something happen. There were a lot of little, Cook getting the rebound and then taking it coast to coast and then dribbling off of his foot.
Oh my gosh, that was so frustrating.
You could tell the crowd kind of just groaned because it's kind of a commonplace nowadays. But he does try to do too much. I also think teams are quicker in doubling him, especially if Iowa's shots aren't falling from the outside. There's not a whole lot of fear there, so they're doubling Cook quicker when he gets the ball, preventing him from getting the ball, facing, basically trying to deny him the ball, and then we just try to force feed it in and turn the ball over. And that's kind of what leads to the downfall.
Yeah, I just looked up his stats, actually. In his freshman year, he was averaging 2.4 turnovers per game. His sophomore year was 2.5, and now he's averaging 3. So, half a turnover extra per game. It's almost becoming kind of a weakness for the Hawks, and I'm worried about that come postseason time. He is the best player on the team, but if he's trying to do too much, he needs to be able to rely on some of the other guys. I mean, Isaiah Moss, Wieskamp, Bohannon, they're great spot-up threes. If people, attack down low when Cook gets the ball, just push it back out, and hopefully you can make some open threes. I guess it also needs the Hawks also need to be able to make those threes, though. That's another an issue that's kind of been hurting them the last couple games.
Yeah, and it's just the ill-advised taking the ball up the court, Cook. You have Cook dribbling the ball at the top of the key, things like that. Just give it to a guard. His range isn't that great. He needs to get down closer to the basket, a few feet away. He also his rebounding didn't seem as strong. I was surprised. I guess I kind of tried to look up the rebounding stats. I was surprised Iowa actually scored pretty well in the rebounding stats by the end of the game. It didn't feel that way in person, but it just seemed like, Cook especially, shot goes up, he's turning away from the basket and moving. And,
Yeah.
Frustrating.
I've noticed that too. And every single game I check the box score, and all of a sudden somehow Iowa has the same amount of rebounds as the other team. Like, for example, the Maryland game. Now, without looking, do you think Maryland had more rebounds or less rebounds than Iowa?
It felt like more.
Yeah. I mean, it felt like every time a shot went up, Maryland got the ball. Iowa out-rebounded Maryland by 6 rebounds. Against Rutgers, they were tied in rebounds. I don't understand it. You're absolutely right. It feels like every time Iowa shoots the ball, the other team gets the ball, when it misses. And whenever the other team shoots the ball, they get 3 or 4 offensive rebounds before Iowa can do something about it. So they're getting 2 or 3 opportunities every time. I'm not sure what the heck this even means as far as a trend. It's just bizarre to me that, we both have the same impression about their rebounding abilities. And now I just look at Tyler Cook. Tyler Cook's averaging 8 rebounds a game. It doesn't feel like he gets 8 rebounds a game. I mean, it feels like he's getting beat by everyone down there.
Yeah, I just wonder too. Maybe it's just because more when the game is on the line. It just seems like maybe they're not getting it, or once the game is kind of blown out, then all of a sudden, like last night with Rutgers, Nicholas Baer kind of came on. I know he had several offensive boards, second chance points there, but the game was kind of well out of reach at that point. They were trying to make another miraculous comeback, but so maybe that kind of padded the stats a little bit more when the actual game flow was going on. Rutgers seemed to be handling the boards pretty well. It was shocking fine how close it actually was.
Yeah, another kind of speaking of rebounds though too. One thing that really frustrates me is the fact that we have Luka Garza. He's 6'11", 245 pounds, and that guy is getting out rebounded by 3 or 4 guys on the Hawkeyes roster. He's averaging just 4.6 rebounds per game. Offensively, he can be a threat, but I feel like he gets taken out of a lot of ball games because he can't defensively handle anyone. He's not athletic enough to handle, smaller guys, and the bigger guys can power through him. Want to get your thoughts on him? I mean, offensively he's been fantastic this year at times, almost unstoppable, but defensively he's really a big liability, I think.
Yeah, he isn't as strong of a center as like an Adam Woodbury was for Iowa for all those years, but he gets pushed around a little bit. He moves his feet. He's at 7 foot. He's almost 7 foot, so it's, you can't imagine the guy's too quick in his lateral movements. But yeah, there's times when he can be a super dominant, super threat, superstar down there. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. And it just seems like the other half of the time, I don't know what he's doing down there, and he's just kind of like you said, a liability.
Yeah,
and it's really frustrating because we've seen him take over games before.
Yep.
I would really like him to turn into that kind of dominant rim defender down there, completely destroy on the defensive boards as well. But so far, he just hasn't been that guy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know we talked a little bit about offensively in general with the Hawks. We're kind of jumping around here, but just kind of his thoughts come up. But you talked about offensively, Iowa just has been struggling across the board, the entire team. And it's interesting because if you look at their roster, I mean, they have probably 6, 7 guys, 8 guys, if you want to count Macy Daly, that could go off at any moment. And now, they're struggling to get one guy to make consistent buckets. Heading into the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament, can you imagine if Iowa just had 4 guys scoring consistently? Let's say Jordan Bohannon actually, made 3-pointers outside of the last 2 minutes of a game. Let's say Tyler Cook was consistent throughout the game and Luka Garza didn't get taken out within 5 minutes for foul trouble, or Wieskamp had, another incredible freshman game, or God forbid Isaiah Moss make a 3-pointer. I think this team could be pretty dangerous, but as we saw obviously against Rutgers where they shot 35% from the field and 27% from 3-point, they could lose to literally any team in the nation on any given night, but they could also beat any team in the nation on any given night.
Well, the frustration with it is that, like yesterday with Rutgers game, nobody was looking to shoot. Like it seemed like nobody on that team was wanting to be the guy to take over. Nick Bear did kind of towards the end. His shooting percentage probably wasn't that great, but at least he was trying to put up shots. Tyler Cook again does try to be the guy, but he's not the guy you want going coast to coast. He's not a jump shooter. But all the guard play, Moss and Bohannon and Wieskamp, just seemed like none of them were looking to shoot, were wanting to be the guy to try to take that game over. And then Moss, I mean, my goodness, Moss is the one player that could set this team to the next level.
Yep.
I mean, everyone knows he's capable of going off for 20 points easy. But then he has multiple games in a row here where he doesn't score. And then with Rutgers, he wasn't even playing because he would go in, he doesn't shoot, and he has 3 turnovers in a few minutes and then just sits the rest of the half.
Yeah, he's a huge enigma, man. At 6'5", 208 pounds as a shooting guard, this guy is incredibly athletic. He can also shoot the three. He's shooting 40% from three-point this year. But, dude, look. So let me read out the stat line for you. In the last – all right, this is so interesting. So against Rutgers, 0 points, 0 of 3 shooting. Ohio State, 3 points, 0 of 4 shooting. Indiana, 6 points, 1 of 8 shooting. Maryland, 4 of 4 shooting for 12. Rutgers, 7 of 12 for 17. Northwestern, 6 of 12 for 16. And then he put up 0, 0, 23, and 2. Like, it's so hit or miss with this guy. But you're absolutely right. If he could go off, or if you could just get consistent, maybe 10 points a game consistently from this guy, he could really make or break this team. I feel like it's tough to guard a Tyler Cook and an Isaiah Moss. Those are two of your more, I would say, athletic and size mismatches offensively for the Hawks.
Yeah, I think Moss could be a better NBA prospect than even Tyler Cook if he would just develop that consistency. The thing with Moss is he needs to get his confidence. If he takes a couple early shots and they don't fall, then you know where his night's going.
Yeah.
If he comes out and drops a couple 3-pointers, then look out. Iowa's going to go off and he's going to score 20 points. We're going to win the game pretty easily.
You're absolutely right.
He's got to see a shot fall early on. The stats you're reading, like Rutgers and Ohio State, he only shot the ball 3 times or 4 times, but then the game scoring, he's shooting 12, 13, 14 times. And that just goes to show you he doesn't shoot the ball very much, and because if he shoots a few times and he misses, it's done.
Just over. Yeah, just completely done.
Whereas a good shooter should shoot through that. Bohannon's kind of an example of that. Bohannon had a
frustrating, but a good example.
What's that?
Bohannon's a very frustrating but a good example.
Yes, but Bohannon's shooting through it, and eventually they're going to fall, and he's going to make 4 3-pointers in a row. But Moss just doesn't do that. It gets in his head, loses confidence, and he's done. And he's one of those guys we really need. If we're going to come and make any sort of run in the Big Ten tournament or the NCAA tournament, they're going to need him.
Absolutely. Another guy who I think is kind of important for the Hawks offensively, kind of a sleeper pick for someone who needs to be important offensively, is Connor McCaffrey. Just because I think the scouting report on him after about 20, 25 games is the fact that this guy doesn't shoot the freaking ball ever. He is always looking to pass. He's like the antithesis of Jordan Bohannon. He's literally always looking to get the ball out of his hands to someone else. In the last couple of games, he's been attacking the basket a little bit more, shooting a little bit more. Not overly successful necessarily, but he's at least shooting a little bit better. How did he play against Rutgers? Did it feel like he was in the game offensively? I mean, he went 1 for 3 from the field. He went 3 for 6 for free throws and then had 5 overall points, which honestly might be one of his highest scoring games of the season.
Yeah. No, Connor is another frustrating guy because, yeah, you're right. He never looks to shoot, ever. I wish we could morph Bohannon and Connor into one player. Connor's ability to feed the ball and set up the offense with Bohannon's ability to shoot. But Connor did attack the basket. Like I was talking about Wieskamp early on, Wieskamp had a couple attempts where shots weren't falling, so he definitely tried to drive. Connor also was trying to do that. His free throw shooting wasn't the greatest. I think he said he was 3 for 6, 50%.
Yeah.
I'd like to think he's a little better free throw shooter than that. The whole team seemed kind of off free throws, but
yeah, they actually had 36 free throws in the game, which is pretty good for them. I mean, you give them 36 free throws, that's usually a win for the Hawks. But they made just 66% of those.
Yeah, it was an off free throw shooting night. Yeah, but Connor did look to score. He was a little more aggressive there. It just wasn't a whole lot to go with it. So it wasn't. I mean, there weren't any other players making runs, so none of the runs were sustained, and they couldn't get any stops. So it kind of went for nothing.
Yeah, funny. I'm looking at Connor's stats right now, and he has he has scored over 4 points 3 times since or in the start of this year. He has scored 6 points once and 5 points twice. Dude, I mean, you're absolutely right. If you could morph him into Jordan Bohannon, that'd be like the perfect freaking point guard. But
Well,
God forbid, they're so opposite of each other.
and Connor was a decent shooter coming out of high school anyway. It's really just his lack of looking to score. He doesn't look to shoot. He doesn't put up a lot of attempts, I don't think. So I mean, if you look at his attempts in those games, I imagine they're just as low as his point totals.
Yeah, he's not actually. He's shooting pretty terribly this year. He's shooting 37% from the field, and holy cow, 11% from 3-pointers.
Yeah, I know his 3 points bad, but
Yeah,
I mean,
you're absolutely right. He's a better shooter than that.
The guy was one of the better shooters on the floor easily any game he was in.
Yeah. Speaking of Connor McCaffrey, though, dude, Patrick McCaffrey is going to be a beast next year too, joining the team. And if for some reason Tyler Cook decides to stay, the Hawks could be pretty good next year.
Yeah, Patrick will be a little more offensive minded than Connor. I think he's probably the better overall player. I mean, their point guards and power forwards determine what position Patrick actually ultimately ends up at. But he's definitely an offensive threat. Hopefully, he can build on his physique a little bit and put on some muscle and be able to throw around in the Big Ten. But yeah, they're gonna get all their pieces back. You know, Cook leaves and Nicholas Baer graduating, but Patrick comes right in. You know, with Jack Nungy and Cordell Pemsl back, there's certainly going to be still some size and some ability there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pemsl is kind of an underrated returnee for next year. I think he kind of fills that Nick Baer role pretty well in terms of the athleticism and just not the athleticism, but the hustle and the want and the willing to do anything you can to make the team win. So that'll be exciting. We only have a few minutes left, man, so I appreciate you jumping on. Any quick last thoughts on the game against Rutgers? I know we kind of jumped all over the board there, but any quick thoughts on the Rutgers game before we kind of tie it up?
You know, the frustrating thing with that is it seems like everybody has their career nights shooting the ball 3 points against Iowa. Comes down to Iowa's inability to guard the 3-point line, which is just frustrating to see over and over again. So I really hope they can address those concerns. I would like to give a shout out to Nicholas Baer. He went out the way that, you know, he came in, hustling to the end. He fouled out there with a couple minutes left in the game, but I think he probably got 4 of his fouls, I feel like, in the last half of the game. But it was all effort. And he had a lot of offensive boards, trying to create second chance points. He chucked up a lot of 3-pointers when the game was out of reach. I think he probably had 4 or 5 of the 8 3-pointers they made. But
yeah, he did actually.
He's been out the way we love him, hustling playing as hard as he can until the end. That's why we love him.
Yeah, man, he had half the 3-pointers and a quarter of the overall made field goals.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, it kind of seemed like everybody was hanging their head and giving up. But, you know, Nick Baer had to come out. They had to drag him out literally because he couldn't stand anymore because he was so exhausted from this he had, which is just what you normally think of when you think of Baer.
Yeah. So last question though, how was the atmosphere at Carver? I mean, was the crowd into it at the beginning? How quickly did the crowd kind of be deflated? I think with the last couple of games with Iowa being able to come back, I feel like there's always a small glimpse of optimism regardless of how bad Iowa is doing. But at what point did you feel like the game was pretty much over? And then just in general, was it a pretty fun game to be at? I mean, you've been to a lot of Iowa basketball games. I think there's been a different perception of the Hawks for a long time. I mean, each year is kind of bringing a new different team. And this year is one of the more talented teams. What was kind of the perception of Carver and the fans?
Well, it was awesome. The atmosphere was awesome. The crowd, it was a sellout. So it reached sellout status. Crowd, it was jam-packed in there. The crowd was into it, I would say. And there were moments when it got really loud and, you know, the crowd was ready to explode. We were all looking for a reason to get up. But Rutgers, it seemed like any time Iowa would kind of inch back into it, Rutgers would go and drop a couple 3-pointers. But to your point of, there wasn't ever this. It was kind of almost, there was never a sense of dread because you think, well, Iowa doesn't really start playing until the under 4-minute mark, right?
Yeah.
And even the announcer made some comment of like, it's time to get this comeback started. I think it's turned into a running joke with comebacks. I think it was, I don't know how much time. There's 3 minutes left. Iowa had closed the gap, but then there were 2 possessions in a row of turnovers that led to breakaway dunks by Rutgers.
Which pretty much did it.
That was the moment where it deflated. People started leaving. You're just like, I mean, like how anticlimactic. 2 breakaway dunks for Rutgers. Their bench goes crazy. And then I think Bear Bohannon drilled a 3 after that. And I remember looking at my buddy going, if they hadn't turned the ball over this last 2 times, this would have been an 8-point game at that point instead of being 12 or 13 or whatever it was. So you could just tell those turnovers in the last couple minutes totally ruined any chance of a comeback, whether they would have been able to or not. The crowd, I hope the crowd continues to turn out for this team. I went to school there during the Licklider years, which were the dark days. The place never sold out. It got to the point it was so bad you could show up 5 minutes after tip-off in the student section. You could still walk all the way down to the court side because there's nobody there.
I mean, we did that a couple of times. I remember going to the Drake Iowa game, and we were literally in the front row.
I would get a text from somebody going, "Oh, we saw you on TV," and I was like, "Well, it's not surprising. I'm the only one here." So
they got to show someone. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of one of those chicken or the egg things. I mean, I think fans want to watch this team. They want to support this team, but they get frustrated by some of the things that I feel like could be changed. Right, the lack of defensive intensity, the inability to stop these poor shooting teams from having incredible nights. I think that can be frustrating for a fan base. But also, I think the fan base needs to appreciate kind of where this team has come from. I mean, last year was a disaster. They're guaranteed to make the NCAA tournament this year. They have 21 wins. They have a chance at 23 wins. They have a lot of talent here. So I absolutely agree. I hope the fan base continues to support this team because that doesn't just have an impact on today's game or tomorrow's game. It has an impact on the next 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, there was 2 5-star recruits in the crowd at the Iowa-Rutgers game. And, yes, not a good game to probably watch, but if the fan energy and the crowd is into it, that's something that can maybe turn a 5-star recruit into an Iowa Hawkeye signee. So I personally hope that you're absolutely right. People continue to show up and support this team going forward.
Yeah, and I think they will. People kind of were down, the 0-3 start in the Big Ten play, not being able to win on the road, which they quickly broke that streak. But people were jumping kind of on Fran's case, putting him on a little hot seat. But I mean, how many 20-win seasons has he had in his 9 years? This is looking like it's going to be his 4th NCAA tournament team. The guy's doing extremely well. I think you even wrote a piece earlier about why Fran deserves more support, kind of thing. So he's going to have more success. He's going to continue to be a successful coach. I know he caused a lot of distractions this week with his comments after the game, which I wish I appreciate his fire and his passion and willingness. But at the same time, you're representing the university. You don't need to be chasing an official down the hallway. That might happen more often than not. But nowadays, everyone's got a phone. They're always recording. Everyone's on Twitter. There were press members right there in the hallway. You can't do that stuff. But I'm going to stick by his side. I think he's going to continue to take this program the right direction. And, like you said, if fans can continue to support it too, that's going to help kind of push it along too with the atmosphere.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. This team has a lot of potential. The only guy Nicholas Bayer is going to be gone. I get that. He's an important piece, but he's not the only piece. Tyler Cook could be leaving for the NBA. But I think, with Jack Nunge coming back, Corden Pemsel, and Patrick McCaffrey, you have a pretty solid slate of guys who are going to be returning on a next year's team, joined by senior Jordan Bohannon, who maybe shoots the ball a little bit better, more consistently. Maybe a Connor McCaffrey that's a little bit more aggressive offensively. And hopefully Isaiah Moss. I know he kind of teetered on the NBA draft last year, but hopefully he comes back as well, and this team could be pretty solid. But, man, I do appreciate you jumping on the show. I want to try to keep it, under that half-hour mark, and we had a good chance to talk a lot about the Iowa-Rutgers game, talk a little bit about the state of Iowa basketball in general. I think it's, nice to kind of chat about that, and I hope the people that are listening to the show do, support the fact that Fran McCaffery is going to be this head coach. He's not leaving anytime soon. Iowa's building something great here. There's a good opportunity that they could make a run in the Big Ten tournament and in the NCAA tournament. All it takes is to get on that run, and hopefully that can start with the Wisconsin game. But that will do it for our episode for today. Real quick, Jared, any last comments before I close out the show?
No, I'm looking forward to the game on Thursday. Get turned around. Go Hawks.
Heck yeah, man. Well, make sure you tune in to our Wednesday episode. We're actually going to be recording a podcast with the Locked On Badgers podcast, talking all about the Iowa-Wisconsin game, getting some good insights from a Wisconsin Badger guy. Hopefully those insights can allow us to feel comfortable going into that game that Iowa could potentially win at the Kohl Center, which is something they don't do very often. But either way, we'll be recording that show Tuesday afternoon, delivering that Wednesday. We have another show coming at you tomorrow morning as well, talking a little bit about the NFL Combine and talking about some other, state of Iowa Hawkeye sports. The baseball team has had a fantastic series down in Oklahoma State, so I want to talk about that as well. But that'll do it for our Monday morning episode. Again, big shout out to Jared Starkweather for joining us on the show today. As you know, I'm your host, Andrew Wade. You can find me on Twitter at Wade_Andrew. And Jared, what is never mind. You don't really want people to be following you on Twitter, so I'll just keep going on. Locked On Hawkeyes Twitter account. You can follow us at Locked On Iowa. And make sure you're subscribing to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast at. And if you have a smart speaker at home, it's super easy. If you have a smartphone or Alexa, just say, Siri, Google, or Alexa, play podcast Locked On Hawkeyes. It's that easy to listen to the latest episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. That being said, thank you for joining us on this Monday morning. Have a fantastic day, Hawkeye Nation, and we'll be back tomorrow.